Hi, y'all. Welcome as we continue through the Psalms together. Today we're going to be reading Psalm 137. This psalm was written after they had returned home from Babylon with the remnant in 536 BC. 20 years later, Babylon was destroyed. The author recalls their experiences while in captivity and recounts the many problems they faced in the discipline of captivity. From his encounter with his past, he learned about the human memory, himself, and the Lord. He learned that memory can actually open wounds. Memory can also build character, and memory can encourage our faith as well. We'll go ahead and start in verse 1 of Psalm 137. Beside the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept as we thought of Jerusalem. We put away our harps, hanging them on the branches of poplar trees, for our captors demanded a song from us. Our tormentors insisted on a joyful hymn. Sing us one of those songs of Jerusalem. But how can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a pagan land? Sitting was the official position of mourning, and the Jewish exiles felt and acted like mourners at a funeral. The exiles sat down by the rivers of Babylon, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and they wept over their memories of Zion. As they sat by the rivers, they put away their instruments because the Babylonians were tormenting them, wanting them to sing their joyful songs of Zion, which was now in ruins. Being normal people, their hearts were deeply pained. Their city, the temple, and their homes had all been destroyed, and they had been deported from God's beautiful promised land, and they were now in captivity in Babylon. Even worse, they had witnessed the Babylonian soldiers throwing Jewish babies against walls and happily smashing their heads in celebration. They were brutal and awful to them. This is not much different than what we have witnessed in today's time as October 7th, 2023 unfolded and Hamas attacked Israel. They practiced the same brutality. Music was meant to be a joyful expression of Israel's worship. It was also used as a way of expressing their grief and seeking the help of the Lord. In captivity, the guards were demanding entertainment from them. They saw no cause for joy, and they felt out of place singing joyful songs in response to their sarcastic, evil captors, so they put their instruments away. The Jewish people were not about to use sacred temple hymns to entertain these pagan people who were being so cruel to them. Memories can bring pain, and pain doesn't go away if we try to deny the pain or bury the memories. Denial usually actually makes things worse. The fact that the exiles were talking and writing about these painful experiences indicates that they were actually facing them honestly, and they were learning how to process through the pain in a mature way. It takes time for a broken heart to heal, and Jesus can heal, and he does heal broken hearts if we're willing to give him all the pieces and let him. We'll continue in verse 5. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget how to play the harp. May my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth if I fail to remember you, if I don't make Jerusalem my greatest joy. These verses move from lament to conditions. They picture Jerusalem because it was where they would rather be. Sometimes we have to lose things before we truly appreciate them. In the middle of their very deep sorrow and pain, the Israelites intentionally remembered where they came from and where their joy resided. Their desire to remember Jerusalem was so strong that the author petitioned the Lord to help them to remember. Forgetting Jerusalem would have been the equivalent of forgetting God, so they worked hard to be intentional about keeping their eyes on Jerusalem. Remembering Jerusalem included remembering the Lord God Almighty, the temple and its ministry, and the city and its people, and the ministry of Israel to the world, which is their very purpose. Before writing about God's judgment on Edom and Babylon, the author judged himself for his own carelessness and even asked God to punish him if he failed to keep his vow. As we look back on life and evaluate our experiences, it's important that we learn our lessons and grow in godly character and integrity. Even though they were suffering deeply, they were learning to work through that suffering. They were learning to keep their focus on God in the midst of their suffering. God's children were being refined by the Lord through this. They were learning how to hold on to their faith in the Lord in the midst of suffering and then in the middle of things not working out like they had hoped or expected. They refocused their attention to God, which was what God wanted all along. We'll continue in verse 7. O Lord, remember what the Edomites did on the day the armies of Babylon captured Jerusalem. Destroy it, they yelled. Level it to the ground. O Babylon, you will be destroyed. Happy is the one who pays you back for what you have done to us. Happy is the one who takes your babies and smashes them against the rocks. These final verses have actually been used out of context by those who refuse Jesus and are at war with God and the Bible. Once the verses are understood in context, they actually encourage the faith of God's people in times when God seems to be shaking everything. The Babylonian guards were taunting the Jewish exiles, wanting them to sing these joyful songs about God and Jerusalem, which was in a heap of ruins. God had not saved them, but he had allowed them to go into exile because of their sins. God was sending correction. However, the Babylonians were extra evil. They were being sarcastic and they were torturing them, and they're asking them, where is your God now? God did allow the Babylonians to take them into exile, but the Babylonians took it way too far. This wasn't a matter of politics. It was a matter of theology. It wasn't a personal vendetta. It was an issue between two nations. These verses express hatred toward evil and anger at the enemy. The author wanted God to step in and deal with Israel's enemies. He wanted God to fight their enemies because Israel was powerless to fight themselves. The Edomites were allies with the Babylonians in the destruction of Jerusalem. While Edom rejoiced over the destruction of Jerusalem and the murder of their innocent babies and children, Israel asked God to repay them with a similar fate because of their sins. As Christ followers, we are to forgive offenders. But if the judge forgave every criminal who appeared in court, the foundation of society would actually be undermined and chaos would result. In God's laws, justice is carried out for criminals. The punishment is to fit the crime. Our courts still follow this principle today. Babylon was God's chosen instrument to discipline the Jews, but the Babylonians, like I said, they went way too far with it, and they treated the people of God's nation in utter brutality. They abused the elderly. They brutally murdered babies and children. They violated women, and they killed for fun. Babylon went to the extreme in their inhumanity. Again, this is exactly what happened in the Holocaust and what we actually watched unfold in Israel on October 7th in the hands of Hamas. When this kind of evil is unleashed, people do and should rise up and demand justice. The psalmist knew from the prophets that God would judge Edom and Babylon, so he prayed for the Lord to keep his promise and bring forth judgment for their brutality. It is always appropriate to ask God to remain faithful to his promises and to bring forth his will. God is a God of love, but he is a God of holy love, and he is a God of justice. The word happy or blessed used in the final two verses doesn't mean joyful or favored by God. It is a Hebrew word asher, and it conveys a sense of well-being, morally justified and flourishing. It's a call for divine justice, not a celebration of violence. It's the peace that comes when a just result is achieved. God did answer their prayers, and he did vindicate his children. One day Jesus is going to return, and all the evil that we endure on the face of this earth is going to be fully vindicated. As a result, peace, like we have never experienced before, will cover the entire land. The Israelites experienced God's discipline because of their sin. God does discipline those he loves, which Hebrews 12 assures us. When we experience God's discipline, it's natural to feel deep sorrow. Sometimes discipline even cuts us off from the blessings of corporate worship and the joy that corporate worship brings. We need to remember that discipline prevents our destruction, and it is an expression of God's love. The goal of discipline is to teach us obedience. The results of discipline are short-term pain for long-term gain. It's a refining process, and as we are refined, we begin to look more and more like Jesus. There is no greater experience in this entire world than living a life in surrender to Jesus and having a heart on fire and passionate for him and his presence. And that is his goal for us. He is refining us. He is perfecting our faith, and he is preparing preparing us for eternity with Him. Nothing matters more. Thanks, y'all. I hope you're having a glorious day in the Lord.